Hello again, we're back to our regular format today to discuss Cassandra Cain Wayne, but first I'd just like to take a moment to thank my patrons for helping bring this episode to life. Now then, onto the episode. Daughter of villainous assassin David Cain and one of the world's greatest martial artists in Lady Shiva, Cassandra was the second Batgirl, the first Black Bat, and the once and future Batman, which we will get into in point 3, but for now, Point 1. Cass is not a minor part of the franchise, despite what some articles may have you thinking. Making her debut as Cassandra during the No Man's Land incident, Batman 567 in July 99, and donning the mantle of Batgirl in Batman Legends of the Dark Knight 120, August 1999, Cassandra Cain's history stretches over 20 years. She was a major and central character during No Man's Land, one of the most major arcs of the pre-Flashpoint era, and following that became the star of her own comic series Batgirl 2000, which ran for 6 extremely popular years before being scuttled, largely thanks to behind-the-scenes managerial issues rather than a lack of popularity, because again, it was really popular. She also would be a major figure in the Birds of Prey, Gotham Knights, and as well as Batman and Robin comics, along with Young Justice and other issues and crossovers along those lines. But as I said, just like with Stephanie, and despite her popularity, Cass faced a lot of sabotage from within the company, particularly due to the likes of Didio. This led to her choosing to give up the Batgirl role for a period and serving as a supporting character in other stories, then reclaiming it only to get mind-controlled by Deathstroke in a long series about Tim. After being freed, she joins the Outsiders for a while, got another year-long run as Batgirl before handing the role over to Stephanie and being forced out of Gotham by the writers once Bruce died. Things were so bad that management wouldn't even let characters talk about her or have her be referenced in the comics, even by her former mentor and mother figure or best friend whom she'd gifted Batgirl to. Despite these efforts to erase her, popular demand brought Cass back once again, now donning the mantle of Black Bat and acting as a member of Batman Incorporated in Hong Kong, which, that's kind of depressing now, but still. Didio and his other contemporaries deemed Flashpoint a chance to remove any and all legacy characters from the franchise. However, as noted, Cass and Steph have a large following which ended up facilitating their respective returns. Though as Oracle has been largely and sadly erased, gods, I'll have to do a video on that, she was being given the codename Orphan in a less major role, but is seemingly steadily reclaiming her former position. It's been a rollercoaster ride to be sure, but no one can say Cass lacks staying power. Point 2. Cass is neither a waif nor obedient. This is sort of a mixed thing I noticed in some later comics, and especially in some areas of fandom, wherein Cass is portrayed as very, soft, sweet, demure, obedient, to the point where it sometimes comes off as a little bit creepy. I saw some arguing that she was the Batboy's therapy dog, which is just, ugh. Grossness aside, this does not line up with Cass at all. Like, she's an incredibly good and empathic person as her backstory is rooted in being traumatized by the pain and horror of death and devoting her life to protecting life. However, saving a life and being nice about it aren't the same thing, and Cass's default response to a problem tends to be to punch it. She openly relishes in combat and the prospect of foes who can challenge her, entice her, let alone foes that she thinks she can go all out against, giving her real shades of a Blood Knight, to be honest. She scarcely if ever showed much interest in societal norms, unsurprising given David Cain raised her as a weapon, and then she wandered a world she couldn't interact with via spoken or written word with no context for several years. She's also honestly kind of a little shit, and it's great. Look at this, Shiva's about to kill her and she's decided to spit in her face. I love Cass. More to the point, while incredibly loyal to both Oracle and Batman, this never really translated into obedience. Oracle went so far as to trying to ambush Cass with traumatic memory recreation and in-depth emotional conversation to bolster her efforts to stop her from going to fight Shiva. And Cass gently knocked her out and left to go fight Shiva. In another story, Batman benched her on trumped-up charges and she went out anyway. Then they had a big dramatic brawl and he admitted he benched her because he wanted her to be more loyal to him than Oracle, which is, wow, this is why so many of her kids never call her Bruce. But Cass just straight up said she's loyal to the idea of the Bat and not the man, and acts accordingly. An often glossed over factor is the fact that until her fateful duel with Lady Shiva, Cassandra had a full-on death wish. This is tied to her guilt for having ended a life at 8 when she didn't understand what murder was, and it stuck with her until Shiva killed her and then resuscitated her so she'd fight it all out. What's more, Cassandra places a painful amount of weight on her role as Batgirl, and more to the point her ability to help people. This was emphasized in her arc where she lost her ability to protect opponents by reading body language due to a telepath rewiring her brain to make speech easier. Yes, there was a lot going on. The only way to get her skills back was through Shiva. See, we circled back around to that. But Shiva demanded a fight to the death in a year's time, as payment for her services, and this was essentially a suicide pact for Cassandra. But she preferred the idea of being perfect for a year than mediocre for a lifetime. Cass ended up actually winning that fight because, to quote Cass, "I don't kill, but I don't lose either." Basically, she beat Shiva into unconsciousness and then passed out herself. It was great. After her death and revival, she did brighten up somewhat and became slightly less self-destructive, but let's just say there's a reason Bruce tends to project himself onto Cass a lot, which played into their very messy dynamic. Because for all her prodigious skill at reading body language, she's not a telepath, and he's still very bad with emotions, and his hopes for her to be a vigilante with no civilian life were not good and eventually kind of addressed when he adopted her, but it was definitely a point of contention for a very long period. Suffice to say, like most Bat kids, Cass has several parental figures and a very complicated relationship with all of them. Final point, Cass is the once and future Batman. This is to me integral, essential. It is the grand panacea of Cassandra Cain's narrative. She is Batman's heir. This isn't just me liking the idea either. There are multiple comics entries and framing devices built into the mythos that said exactly that. When Tim summoned the future heroes in Red Robin, she was literally Batman. Everything from her costume to Bruce's mentorship to her preserving life ideology, goals, and the stated narrative communicated this idea clearly. Even efforts by writers to cut her out of the narrative didn't succeed in removing the idea, despite banishing her from Gotham and crowbarring Dick into the role of Batman he didn't want. The underlying narrative and progression of her character into Batman's successor remained and was emphasized with her return as Black Bat. Now, I could go down the list of other potential claimants to argue against them filling the role permanently, but like, Dick and Duke would never want it. Oracle has long since outgrown Gotham. Steph and Jason would never be offered it. Despite some writers' efforts to mold Tim into the role, he never wanted it, nor did it ever work that well, I feel. But all of those options have kind of fallen to the wayside in the very recent years due to Damian. Now, I don't have any issue with Damian himself. He's a fine character and an interesting addition to the mythos. The way he's used by some writers to invalidate the found family aspects of the Bat Clan by emphasizing blood son, blood son, blood son like they're Ra's al Ghul does irk me. But as noted previously, I'm above blaming characters for the decisions of writers, especially when a lot of the time the invalidating is not even coming from Damian himself. But to the point, I don't think Damian being Bruce's heir makes narrative sense. Just being the bio son doesn't really mean anything. Bruce came up with Batman when he was a kid. It's not a biological lineage that goes back 10 generations and requires a blood pact. Talia herself has noted Damian can be so much more than Batman. His desire to play the role mostly seems to be rooted in being told he wants it by his evil supervillain grandfather. And narratively speaking, what kind of arc is that? He was told he wanted it, he didn't get it for a bit because he was 12, then one day he gets it, then spends the rest of his life looking after this one city that he has minimal personal connections to because that's what his father, who only partially raised him, did. That's not much of an arc to me, not much of a story. There's just nothing much there, and while I know it can be done in an interesting way, literally any of them could become Batman in an interesting way. But thematically, narratively, and personally, I feel many comics back this up, that only Cass can be the true heir of Batman. Think of it, someone who was raised as a weapon, taught not to value life, only to see the horrifying cost of death with her own hands. Someone who broke away from all she knew and loved in guilt and spent years wandering, doing all, albeit what little she could, to atone for what she believed never could be atoned for. Someone who by mere chance found herself in the city of the Bat, the hero who strikes terror into the hearts of his enemies, but who uses the same skills she was taught to protect and save lives. Taken in by one and then another, welcomed into a true family, and is taken under the wing of the Bat himself, someone who shares her dedication to the ideals of heroism and understands the importance of symbols and embody more than any one person can, and finds that her conviction is matched or even surpasses his own. It's all Cass has ever wanted, needed, but why she wants it is informed by her own agency, desires, and counteract how she was raised, her history. It's a journey of guilt, discovery, personal redemption, and the reclamation of one's life from tragedy for the good of many. That is Batman. That is Cassandra Cain. That's all for today, folks. Thanks for stopping by. If you want to help support my work, please check out the links to my Patreon and Ko-fi in the description. These channels you can support my work, get sneak previews, make requests, or even contract me directly for 3D commissions. Thanks for stopping by.